Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the GENEDRIVE investor presentation. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type in your question and press send. Given the significant number of investors on the call today, the company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard, and we will notify you by email when they are ready for you to review. I would also like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we would like to submit the following poll, and if I could encourage you to give that your attention, that would be most kind. Thank you very much indeed. And I'd now like to hand over to Matthew Fowler, CFO, and David Budd, CEO of GENEDRIVE PLC. Good morning.
Good morning, Mark. Thank you for the introduction, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to GENEDRIVE's interim results presentation to December 2020. The presentation covers the first half of our fiscal year and updates since the period end, covering a time of tremendous change in the company during which new, significant, and exciting opportunities opened up to us, while some of our traditional activities experienced some development headwinds from the pandemic. During the period, we made significant advances in our assay menu, in our instrument and software capabilities, our commercial partnerships, and consequently, our ability to serve significant markets, all aiding our goal in advancing diagnostics to the point of care. The presentation begins with a standard investment disclaimer, but as normal, we choose to point out the key aspects of paragraph 5 there. Presentation is a review, but it does include statements that are forward-looking statements. And by their very nature, they do involve risks and uncertainties because they relate to future activities that depend on circumstances that the company may not be in full control of. So we do communicate milestones to you based on the information that we have and that we believe to be true at the point in time. Presentation itself is posted in its entirety on Investor Meet Company website as well as the GENEDRIVE PLC website. So you don't need to do screen captures or anything. You can download it there following the presentation. So as Mark mentioned, my name is Dave Budd. I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at GENEDRIVE. My professional experience is aligned in all respects to the goal of the company, with international experience in both molecular diagnostics and point-of-care diagnostics. I'm joined today by our Chief Financial Officer, Matthew Fowler, who has a strong background in healthcare and related manufacturing industries. Matthew and I will share presentation responsibilities today. I'll take you through an overview of our development and commercial progress, and Matthew will review our mid-year financials and relevant developments since then. Our strategy as a company has been really quite consistent as we leverage our point-of-care molecular diagnostic instrument into discrete opportunities that benefit from immediacy of testing or by the availability of an affordable molecular testing solution outside of the traditional hospital testing lab. For those of you that have not previously seen one, you can see here on the slide a picture of the GENEDRIVE instrument. It's a small, easily transported device that can serve as a much better alternative to larger benchtop instruments in many focused assay areas. Historically, the company's focus was almost exclusively in low and middle income markets, but over the past 3 years, we've broadened our focus to include more so-called global market products, where we now have a range of unique products, including our high throughput 96 SARS-CoV-2 test, a range of products for the US military called Bioflex, and the world's first point of care antibiotic-induced hearing loss assay, which we're in the process of introducing this year. So existing investors will be familiar since our last presentation around our test portfolio. We currently have 4 different tests on market and a further 2 in development. With the products on market, the GENEDRIVE 96 SARS-CoV-2 kit is distinct in that it doesn't run on the actual GENEDRIVE instrument platform. It's a standalone, fully formulated, freeze-dried PCR test in a 96-well plate format, compatible with 3 and soon to be 4 third-party PCR instruments. Much of the company's focus was on the development of this product over the course of last year and bringing it to market in conjunction with its distribution partners. The pathogen detection products are a suite of tests, which I mentioned we call Bioflex, which have been designed and manufactured for military use by the United States Department of Defense. We had expected at this time to enter into a new supply contract with the government, but that has been delayed, we think, just because of COVID and the DoD's focus on that. The company recently announced a new distribution agreement with US-based Mountain Horse Solutions. The purpose of this distribution agreement really is to expedite the procurement processes for the Bioflex with the DoD and to return orders and revenue back to GeneDrive as quickly as possible this year. The third test is our antibiotic-induced hearing loss kit, a test we're extremely proud of and represents the world's first rapid molecular point-of-care test for a neonatal intensive care setting. The test is used to screen babies for a genetic mutation that can cause deafness when they're administered antibiotics. And then the fourth area is the GeneDrive Hepatitis C ID Kit, which is used for the qualitative assessment of HCV-infected patients. It's targeted at low and middle income markets. It's CE marked, and it's distributed via Sysmex and Arcray into India, Asia Pacific, and Africa. I think in 2020, the product experienced significant headwinds as the world healthcare systems focused almost exclusively on combating coronavirus. And then in development remains two kits which run on the GeneDrive platform. The first is our point-of-care version of SARS-CoV-2, which we'll be updating you on during the presentation. And the second is the GeneDrive point-of-care test for molecular diagnosis of tuberculosis infection. And development of that product has effectively been paused during this reporting period due to the focus of our resources on GeneDrive COVID-19 products. So I'll now take you through our programs for the development period up to December and any significant advances that we've had since that point in time. So the first product to review is the GeneDrive 96 SARS-CoV-2 kit, which, as you know, consumed much of our time and energy in 2020. While, frankly, utterly simple in concept, in reality, it is a very complicated product for the company to bring to market and develop. The product uses a combination of GeneDrive and Cytiva intellectual property and know-how to produce a ready-to-go PCR formulation in a 96-well plate. It comprises 3 distinct part numbers for different PCR platforms and required the development of an interpretive software package, extensive clinical and performance validation of all these various combinations in order to CE certify it. Very positively, we demonstrate excellent performance for this product, whether used manually or used in automated RNA extraction instruments. We have some performance data in the presentation to share with you, but it's fair to say that the product's performing as we expect in many independent evaluations. What has frustrated our commercial progress are much slower regulatory processes than we would have anticipated when the product was launched. Globally, the regulatory agencies have been overwhelmed, frankly, by suppliers trying to get their product into market. And 99% of these are, sort of me-too reagent kits of liquid components that require formulation by the labs on site. And they don't possess any of the finesse, ease of use, or the ingenuity presented through the GeneDrive solution. But regulatory agencies have been unable to keep to their own timelines and consequently aren't delivering time commitment to companies in which their submissions will be reviewed. We do regularly try to prod and push regulatory agencies along to try to advance our applications. And it's fair to say, while they are overdue, we are being very diligent in pursuing them. The reality is that we have an excellent product poised to go into markets with distribution companies eager to serve customers, but we do remain paused in many regions. India has been a slightly separate case, and we have had constant back and forth with regulators to the point that we have even created a India-specific product for that market with its own distinct labeling and packaging, fully aligned to the documented requirements of that country's needs. However, we are continually countered with new requirements or objections from different individuals or different offices for some additional test requirement or data. And although I think it's not in our benefit to go into huge detail here, but if we don't feel that this can be positively concluded, and if we don't believe, frankly, that regulators are interested in approving products that bring innovation, at some point in the near future, we'll devote our time elsewhere. I mean, just in the past few weeks, we received regulatory clearance in Thailand off the back of, rapid and successful independent performance assessments in that country, and consequently have appointed a new distributor to begin commercial activities there. So clearly, in-market approvals can be performed and can be achieved. On the commercial front, because of the delays in regulatory approval in major markets, we haven't got to where we want it to be. However, the company has significant opportunities in the funnel, which we're working to realize. In December, we communicated an opportunity with a European Ministry of Health, which, although we would have thought should have concluded months ago, I can report that it remains absolutely viable opportunity for the company, and we are still hopeful that it will come our way in due course. The second large opportunities that we're working on in the company now is managing our new distribution arrangement with Beckman Coulter Life Sciences. And although, undoubtedly we will experience similar regulatory headwinds in the USA, as we don't have emergency use authorization yet, the FDA does allow you to import and sell products while your application is pending. So we'll need to focus on the segment of end users that don't require EUAs and are interested in the validation data that GENEDRIVE and Beckman have developed together, and the possibility to automate these solutions on a laboratory robotic system. So Beckman's rolled out sales responsibility for our products to their sales teams selling RNA extraction chemistry, as well as their sales teams selling biomech automation. And they're conducting an aggressive marketing and lead generation campaign at this early stage of our agreement. This is just a selected overview of some of the external studies that have been done with our kits. These include labs in the United States, in Spain, Italy, and within Africa as well. They're all independent labs, and none of this data is reflective of data that was generated for regulatory submissions. If you look through them, you can see there is some small variation in results, which you would expect, because labs collect samples by different methods and they perform tests in slightly different ways, and in each of these studies we're actually compared to a different test that in its own right has got variable performance. So but performance wise, whether it's in our own hands or it's in independent hands, the test is working well, and we demonstrate that. A simple review of online literature will quickly show you that this data, as we said when we launched it, remains in a top tier of real world performance. Now, our distribution with Beckman Coulter Life Sciences represents a very significant opportunity for the company. I don't think it should be understated how important a relationship with a company of Beckman Coulter's size could ultimately be for GENEDRIVE. Beckman has the financial capabilities, distribution and sales reach, market knowledge, and end user contacts that we simply do not. It also has the capability to focus its organization on this as a priority, and that genuinely gives us the confidence that this could build into something very meaningful. Our relationship began through a development and cooperation agreement in the summer of 2020, evolved into a distribution agreement at the end of January 2021, based on the generation of good performance data and frankly, just a really good positive experience in working together. And I can genuinely say that Beckman is taking the opportunity very seriously. It placed its first order with us approximately 4 weeks ago for around $400,000 US, which it's using for evaluations and to fill up its sales funnel. Now, we do recognize there is a sales cycle required for new customers or to convert customers already using someone else's kit, as well as a lead time for the supply, delivery, and installation of Biomex systems. So in my mind, it's still very early days, but it's apparent that Beckman is absolutely engaged and focused on delivering sales. We are very pleased to have them as a partner as our first entry point selling GeneDrive products into the United States. Moving on to point of care, we have made a lot of very positive progress in the development of a point of care diagnostic test for SARS-CoV-2 over the past months. Now, ultimately, the type of test that we're trying to develop is complicated. It's multifaceted. It involves the development of a new reagent system, potentially new hardware components, certainly new software. And because our tests are freeze-dried, an additional work stream, so to speak, of working with an external company in developing a robust manufacturer around these new reagent combinations. Now, we believe that a point of care COVID market will be here for a long period of time. The market's currently being supplied, as you see as an example here in the UK, with inexpensive but quite inexact lateral flow tests designed for mass population screening. And these types of tests, really to be used for a diagnosis purpose, often requires confirmatory PCR testing because PCR is much more accurate. But proper molecular point of care testing offers the possibility for rapid, highly accurate testing, whether that's in a focused healthcare setting or for confirmation of less precise tests in environments like schools or office or occupational settings. But tests need to be rapid, need to be accurate, need to be sensitive, and they also need to be reasonably priced, right? Now, the product that we have is still in development, and we're following actually two parallel paths. So in December, we announced a direct from saliva test method that generates positive results in around 15 minutes and negative results in 20 minutes. So that would compare to an in-lab PCR test, which are typically between an hour and a half and 2 hours. Subsequently, we've also moved on to a swab-based workflow that promises in some way to be even more impressive. A key driver in the saliva test development is ensuring biosafety, which means not exposing the operator to any potential infection, which is a significant hurdle in most tests available either on market currently or in development, because you need to open up a sample container in order to get at the sample to test. But in order to overcome this, we are using an inactivating CO2 COV2 reagent during the virus collection process. So our assay is a 2-gene assay, unlike those provided by Abbott or Lumira or Optigene, and the reagents can be lyophilized or freeze-dried for room temperature storage. So our initial rapid progress was slowed a bit, frankly, by differing performance of the assay in saliva, depending on which available model virus we use to test the assay. So when you're developing tests, you're typically doing it against synthetic virus strains rather than real virus strains, really just through availability of sample and also safety for the people doing the development. But this isn't an unknown phenomenon, but it's critical that we have to have a rigid and repeatable framework or benchmark, not only which to drive development against, but ultimately against which to manufacture. So work here continues with probably a 3-month delay or so. But as we say, we believe that the point of care COVID testing market is growing, it's evolving, and it'll continue to do so for the foreseeable future. This is a market that's here to stay. The second development path that we're following is based on swab testing. And it's similar to the workflow that we use in our antibiotic-induced hearing loss test. So we've demonstrated a rapid molecular test that can achieve high sensitivity, higher than we can achieve in saliva, and analytical time to results in circa 10 minutes, which is faster than competitive systems, all while maintaining biosafety and multi-gene targeting, which really is really important as we see and we hear about the emergence of viral strains and viral mutations. We will, of course, keep you updated as development progresses, but in either case, we're focused on a Q2 2021 release for first product availability of one of these solutions, and then moving on to a subsequent version that will allow us to use Cytiva bead technology, because that allows us to do things very inexpensively and also rapidly scale production capability. So, in summary, for our two GeneDrive COVID-19 projects, we do recognize the frustration and delays related to commercialization, because frankly, we share the same frustrations. Delays have in the main chiefly been related to registrations, of which we have a limited control. But we have developed a unique product with very compelling features. We can demonstrate and have demonstrated excellent performance in the field, and we've aligned ourselves now with blue chip companies such as Sysmex and Beckman Coulter to take us to market. Our product to date has been shown to be unaffected by the major variants that have been detected around the globe, and these variants will affect the efficacy of vaccines, and they will affect how the virus spreads around the globe. We have an active, significant funnel of opportunities at hand, which we hope we won't have to wait much longer to realize. And our point of care test is being developed to retain a set of really competitive advantages, principally in terms of speed and biosafety, which I think will hold the company in really good stead moving forward. So having spent the majority of the presentation now on COVID, we have 3 more slides covering our antibiotic-induced hearing loss test, our military application, and briefly we'll touch on our hepatitis C test as well. But for those of you that have had the opportunity to listen to discussions about this previously, you'll know that the team at the company and myself personally are very passionate about the opportunities in our antibiotic-induced hearing loss test. Not only is this test unique to GeneDrive at the point of care, but it's professionally very rewarding to see the impact our efforts can make in the life opportunities of so many young children. The product works by taking a swab of cells from the baby's inner cheek, adding that sample to the GeneDrive MT-RNR1 cartridge, and then analyzing it in the GeneDrive instrument. The mutation affects around 1 in 500 babies, so in practice, this is a screening assay where all babies get tested looking for the few that carry the mutation. Those that can be given an alternative antibiotic are once a mutation is found. There is around 80,000 babies a year born in the UK that are given antibiotics shortly after birth. So it'll give you a proxy value of the market in Europe and the US of around 35 to 50 million pounds, depending on price and route to market. Now, our NHS partners in Manchester and Liverpool worked really diligently in 2020 to complete a large performance evaluation of this product, which sought to determine if this type of technology could be implemented in a neonatal healthcare setting effectively. And I think it really was heroic work on the part of the clinicians and the nurses to get even close to the endpoint of 1,000 admissions during the study period, when most healthcare resources were being rediverted to COVID, and frankly, even visiting hospitals by companies such as ours was banned. So the study itself was hugely beneficial for us, delivering a lot of very valuable feedback on our product design. On the slide, you'll see an image, a small image on the bottom left of a new version of GeneDrive, which incorporates some of the changes that we picked up as a result of the study, and we're now designing in for future release. So this includes an integrated touchscreen, a lock-in cartridge position port, electronic results, transmission, and the provision of independent positive and negative standards for training and assessment of users. And this fully integrated version ultimately will be the product that we commercialize globally. We continue to work actively with Inspiration Healthcare, who's our distributor in the UK and Ireland for our AIHL product. We're working with them and their network of key opinion leaders to establish some early adopter accounts, which we're planning for summer 2021. As I mentioned previously, we will take the product to Europe on the back of our CE marking work, but ultimately we'd like to be able to take this product to the US as well. because we believe that that market has not only the clinical and financial drivers, but the legal and litigious drivers that make the adoption of this type of product in the market very attractive. GENEDRIVE's pathogen detection products, the Bioflex was developed in conjunction with the US military over a period of approximately 5 years and generated around $10 million US dollars of income for the company. Bioflex tests are able to rapidly detect multiple pathogens that could be used in a bioterrorist attack, basically at the site where the testing is required. So no other portable systems currently approved for the same target set by the US DoD. The development project was successful. We've developed a highly specialized and specific tactical unit for the DoD that offers GENEDRIVE a high margin product in a potentially large marketplace. Post-development, we spoke about a potential new customer opportunity within the DoD, and it was anticipated that by this point we would have a new commercial contract in place with the military. But again, COVID headwinds have not been in our favor. We didn't have the feet on the ground to make a meaningful impact on their buying behaviors. So post-period end, we established a new commercial distribution agreement with Mountain Horse Solutions, who are out of Colorado. Mountain Horse is a specialist US military supplier with existing established contracts in the procurement processes of the DoD. So the original potential buyer that we talked about is still very much in the frame. They've continued to test and trial our system, and we're hopeful that Mountain Horse will help us close this opportunity faster. Basically, the way it should work is the military would contact a company such as Mountain Horse, and for example, could specify them to assemble a certain number of field deployable kits, as they call them, or packages under an existing contract framework. So they might call up and say, look, I need, just making these numbers up, 55 kits containing 2 GENEDRIVEs, 400 cartridges, a water purification system, 200 environmental testing filters, etc. And Mountain Horse, in turn, would then be responsible for assembling all of that, procuring all of those things, packing them into deployable kits, and delivering those products for the US military wherever they happen to be around the world. And they have an existing contract framework in order to do that. And that's really essentially how it can ultimately benefit us. Mountain Horse would stock product that avoids protracted contract framework negotiations, and they have the DoD decision-making contacts to expedite the business opportunity. So their business model really is to take a small margin off both the buyer and a little bit from the seller as well. And to be fair, we're not giving much margin away for what I would consider to be really significant benefits. So we're very pleased to be in this new arrangement with Mountain Horse. And we're hopeful that obviously that will lead to a faster procurement cycle of GENEDRIVE within the US military, and also by their commercial capabilities, allow us to promote and sell more broadly within the military organization. And my last slide for the moment before I hand it over to Matthew is on our Hepatitis C ID Kit. This is designed to detect and diagnose individuals that are infected with hepatitis C and determine if they're eligible for treatment with direct-acting antiviral drugs. The product was the first to market qualitative point-of-care test, and it is pre-qualified by the World Health Organization. And as we previously communicated, our progress in this product last year was very much hampered by COVID, and you know, I think it's not really possible to overemphasize as a healthcare company how many existing work streams, existing rates to market were impacted by COVID last year. That said, it is very good to see in recent months some green shoots around HCV with additional activity, mostly in Africa through Sysmex, which again, it's really good to see and see their focus on that product. A very large independent external study was completed last year in Cameroon and Georgia, and that's expected to be published in the next few months. Results were very positive, showed excellent product performance in real world situations. So we will of course make you aware when we see that ultimately being published and available for review. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to hand over presenting responsibilities to Matthew to go over the financial summary up to our mid-year in December.
Thanks, David. Okay, so I just have a couple of slides here on the financials. I'm mainly going to focus on cash, but first of all, I'm going to run through the income statement and the balance sheet. So with regards to the income statement first, revenue slightly down on prior year, 355 versus 627. And the current year revenue or current period revenue mainly relates to the US DoD that David's already spoken about. Operating costs for the period were pretty much in line with the prior, giving us a loss of just under 3 million. Below operating costs, there's a large credit of 3.6 million in finance costs. This credit is related to the conversion of the BGF loan notes in autumn of 2020. This conversion, accounting-wise, creates a large credit to the P&L of this 3.6, which when you add to the operating loss gives us a profit before tax of 0.6 million. I then make an estimate of tax for the period, a tax credit of 370, giving a profit after tax of 991. Moving down now to the balance sheet, the most notable movements are the inventory growth and trade payables decline since June 20. And this is all related to our stock build in the summer of 20. So you remember that following our fundraise, we procured some key enzymes to guarantee our ability to supply. So this procurement was in inventory and creditors at June 20 and has moved across into full inventory at December 20 with payables being paid down. The other notable balance sheet movement relates to the convertible I mentioned a moment ago. The 11.6 million liability at June 20 was extinguished on conversion with the 3.6 million credit to the P&L and an 8 million credit directly to equity reserves. The net accounting for the conversion, therefore, has helped push our balance sheet position from net liabilities of 3342 at June 20 to net assets of 5329 at December 20. So big movements from the convertible. Okay, moving on to cash flow now. The slide here is set up as 6 monthly run rates. So we've got the 6 month period to December 19, 6 months June 20, and 6 months December 20 to show comparable run rates. You can see from this slide that the operating losses are pretty consistent, 2.9, 3, 2.6. However, underneath the operating loss, you can see working capital has consumed 1.2 million in the 6 months to December 20, which is a big change from prior periods. This working capital movement goes back to my comments on the balance sheet. It's related to the stock build and securing supplies for COVID over the summer. There have been a few questions on working capital, so I'd just like to expand on that stock position. So overall, I'd say we sit very comfortably with our inventory and have secured sufficient components or critical components for relatively high volumes of sales in the short to medium term. It's worth noting that given the relatively high margin of the product, finished product, the working capital requirement here is not as large as it could be, and also worthy of saying that the enzymes have pretty long shelf lives and are used across almost the range of our products. So that makes it quite simple to manage, and we have good forecastability and good understanding of those supply lines. Below working capital, not a huge amount of movements, but the two items of note. So we submitted our R&D tax claim in November 20, and we're still awaiting our cash payment of £1 million. In the prior year, December 19, we received our cash in a much shorter time frame, hence we received that 971. No concerns over collectability, it's just timing and admin process, and on chasing we hear the problems and issues of home working and COVID causing delays. And secondly, to note in the cash flow, the interest payable of 370. This was related to the conversion of the loan notes, and this is interest owing on conversion that we'd previously been deferring. So our cash consumption for the period was 4.4 million, and when added to opening cash, gives a closing position of 3.8 million at December 20. To bring this cash number up to date, as at the 15th of March, so a little over a week ago, the cash position was 2.8 million, and at that point it still excludes the R&D tax credit of £1 million and our most recent sales, so which would add about another 400,000. So the sort of quasi cash, or if I was to add that in, means that we're sort of sitting at around 4.2 million fully collected. Then in terms of burn rate, after high consumption over summer, again, back to that stock build, we're currently back down to a more normalized burn rate of about 400,000 per calendar month. So with that stated quasi cash number of 4.2 and a burn rate of 400,000, you can kind of gauge the cash runway, with that additional caveat that the summer stock build has left us in a very comfortable position to service any demand in the very short term, and we don't see cash flow issues arising from over trading. Okay, so 2 brief slides on the financials, expanding on the impact of that loan note conversion and hopefully bringing things right up to date in terms of cash and cash flows.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew. Last slide before we go on to question session is just news flow. What you expect to see us coming out from the company in the next sort of 6 months, midterm and longer term. And it really just covers the key elements that we've talked about today. We expect in the shorter term to be updating you on our European Ministry of Health opportunity, registration updates, whether that's or significant registration updates, FDA, WHO, India, launch planning for our GENEDRIVE SARS-CoV-2 point of care test in Q2, and then going into the summer, commercial launch of our AIHL and initial sales from that. In the medium term, we hope we'll get to a point with Mountain Horse that we can confirm an order rate, overall size, and the combination of number of assays used per device for the military Bioflex opportunity, and then moving on to version 2 of our GENEDRIVE point of care device, where we'll be able to leverage Cytiva bead technology. Overall, these things lead into our 3-year objectives. We expect that our SARS-CoV-2 point of care, it will continue to provide revenue into the company into the future. We don't think that this is a product area that will go away. Successful traction in AIHL and the UK and Ireland will lead us to expansion into other markets. And as we mentioned, the USA is in scope. And once the world calms down a little bit, we're able to get back to our tuberculosis product, get that out the door and launched, and developing additional pipeline with additional markers as we try to drive GENEDRIVE product to the point of care. So I'll stop at that point, and we'll go over to questions, some of which were submitted in advance, and some of which you have the opportunity to submit live.
Matthew, David, thank you very much indeed for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the company take a few moments to review the investor questions submitted today, I would like to remind you that recording this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, will be available on your Vesta Meet company dashboard, and we will send you an email to notify you when they are ready for your review. Firstly, thank you to investors that took the time to pre-submit questions, and just given the number of questions that were pre-submitted ahead of today's event, we're going to kind of put them into a couple of categories at the beginning, but the company has reviewed, and as I said, we will publish responses to those questions to everybody on this call this morning. On that basis, if I could perhaps, obviously David as well, and Matthew, obviously during the live event, investors have submitted questions. They're on the Q&A tab. And what I'll do is, after we've addressed these first couple of thematic questions, perhaps I could hand over to you to read the question. If you could say who it's from and give a response where it's appropriate to do so, that would be great. Right, so without no further ado, and I am mindful of time and using it as wisely as we can, the first kind of theme was around working capital requirements. This question here, I guess, encapsulates most of the content in the others, is what are the working capital requirements to scale production to meet demand from across lab-based PCR COVID tested, POC-based COVID testing, AIHL rollout, and potential DoD and HCV orders as they land through in 2021. Perhaps I can hand that over to you, Matthew.
Okay, so yes, okay. Thank you. I think I covered a bit of this just now when I talked about the stock build, clearly highlighting that within finished goods, and the very high margin or low component of raw materials in working capital. But perhaps if I just embellish a little on and go into the production side. So obviously GENEDRIVE, our sort of secret sauce or our IP is in the wet mix chemistry, and we outsource the freeze drying to Cytiva. Cytiva freeze dry the product, but then also pack, more often than not, ship direct to our customers. So what we have is a situation where the supplier invoice is coming in at almost the same time as the customer invoices are being sent out for shipment. So we have a kind of almost a natural hedge. So between that low raw material component and a sort of hedged customer receipts and supplier payment point of view, we're pretty comfortable on working capital. And if the working capital requirement was to ramp severely, I mean, we are debt free, and factoring against that book or asset backed against that debt position would be relatively easy and quick, given that we are in a debt free position. So in terms of working capital, we're pretty happy, pretty comfortable, and we've got plans if things were to change.
Thank you very much indeed. The second question was generic around the PCR market. It reads, we are seeing more and more quality rapid antigen tests being validated and authorized. What impact do you think this is having or will have on the PCR market?
I guess that one's probably for me. I think this is a phenomenon that you see in most areas of diagnostic testing, where things initially begin in a central lab, and then they become more broadly available throughout the market. You know, the advantage obviously of antigen testing is it's very inexpensive. It has the promise to be very inexpensive, and it can be broadly distributed in the market, you know, in the way that an instrument-based assay can't. You know, and you know, even obviously my own kids come home and have, you know, lateral flow testing now from schools, and you know, that was a phenomenon I think that no one you know, really ever would have thought would have happened 18 months ago. But so I think they certainly have a role to play in sort of community screening. I think where we are on a technology standpoint, though, is that they haven't generally been shown to be of an extremely high quality, but they're probably better than the alternative of doing nothing, is sort of where we are. So how does it impact PCR testing? Well, it probably, frankly, has a slightly negative effect on central lab testing, right? If people are tested in the community, then they're less likely to send a test into a central lab. I think that would be fair to say. But I think it also, on the converse side, it drives the adoption and the knowledge and the acceptance of PCR-based testing out at the point of care, right? So in many ways, it actually supports and leverages what it is that we're trying to do, right? So I think that you know, it's playing its role right now. It's probably the best alternative that we have right now. But going forward, there probably is room for better performing products and technologies as well. Yeah. Last comment I would make is I do, obviously we feel lots of incoming inquiries and questions and things from you know, customers, distributors, investors, etc. And I think that this idea that there should be one technology or one test or one company that somehow has the best solution, and that will therefore you know, sort of be the only solution that's used in the world is absolutely wrong. The reality is that there's you know, not infinite, but there are so many different applications and areas for point of care testing, right? And every product, I mean, I've even heard the DHSC guys here in the NHS say that every product has its use case, right? Provided that a product performs well, right now, there's probably a market segment where it would apply better than, or it would be applicable almost better than anything else. So I don't think we're going to evolve to a market where there's going to be one technology, one test, one company that somehow, you know, owns the globe. case of hundreds of companies with hundreds of different solutions occupying different end customers targets, I think is where it will all go.
Thank you, David.
Okay.
Well, look, I think it will probably just make sense. Obviously, if I could hand back to you, as I said, if you just open the Q&A tab, you'll see the investor's first name, their initial. If I could ask you to read out perhaps the question and who it's from, and where appropriate, give an answer. And there are lots of questions, and there is absolutely, we don't have the time to address all of these, but perhaps, as I said earlier, post this meeting, we'll be able to review every question that's come in and where appropriate, look at providing a response. So I'll hand back to you, David, if I may, and I'll pick up with you just before we close in about 15 minutes.
Okay, all right. I'm just sort of glancing through them. Actually, there are not that many that are finance related, so I suspect I'll probably be answering most of these. But obviously, Matthew, if you want to have a scroll through and see if there's something in there that you want to address. There's one here from Jason that says, does our association with Beckman Coulter give us any advantage at all with the FDA? I think in theory, it sounds like it should, but I think in practice probably it doesn't. The FDA, we are the applicant to the FDA, so we are the company of record, and so their communication is directly with us. We have had discussions with Beckman and their regulatory team around if they were able to support us, and that is sort of the theme that we get back from them, because they are not an applicant to it. Then it's difficult for them. I think we might get ourselves to the position at some point. Let me just backtrack a sec. What sits with the FDA from our application standpoint is our instructions for use for the GENEDRIVE test, right? So that includes our performance data. It includes all of the methodology, the extraction kits that we use, and that's where the Beckman tie-in comes, right? The Beckman extraction kit is part of our instruction for use. But what is not in our instructions for use yet is the use of the Beckman Bioflex system, right? That data set is not yet in there. And it is possible that we could get ourselves to the point where that submission is done in conjunction with Beckman, but we're not there yet. And if we were, then it is possible, I guess, at that point that Beckman could help us a little bit. Okay, so Mark, the next this isn't from, well, there's four questions here, so from different people that have the same theme, which given that there's four of them, I'll just group them together. But I have to confess, I don't exactly understand the root cause of the question. So this one says, can we get confirmation, please, of exactly what kind of information is still currently restricted within non-disclosure agreements in place with Beckman Coulter, Cytiva, and your other suppliers, and what are the timelines or events that will lift these non-disclosures? So I confess I don't really recognize the driver for the question. We do have non-disclosures in place with our suppliers and partners, just as part of our standard contracts that we have with people, and they're no different than what you would find in any other contract with anyone else. So I'm not sure why what the roots of the root of the questions are, what timelines or events will lift these NDAs, but just as long as the contracts are in existence. So I only answer it. I'm sorry, I don't really understand the purpose of the question, but I only answer it because it was asked several times. This next question is from Michael. What steps have been taken to ensure adoption of point of care COVID testing within the healthcare and hospitality settings and other settings, both in the UK and elsewhere? Well, at this point, we don't have a product yet, right? Obviously, to drive adoption in the market. Unlike our high throughput test, for point of care, we are more focused on the UK market, and there is a known set of people, a known process to get product evaluated in the UK. So we are engaged with those people, but again, we don't have a final formulation of a product yet in which to engage people with. But clearly the way to get engagement is to have product features and product performance that other companies or other tests don't, or to have your product positioned at a specific in a specific niche or a specific end user that other people can't get to. So one of the things that we've been trying to keep very strong in our point of care product definition is biosafety. So right now, COVID testing is typically done within class 2 laboratories, right? So people are wearing PPE and they're working in vented conditions to prevent infection to the operator. When you move out of those environments and you move into a point of care setting, although you can certainly still wear PPE, some of the environmental and safety conditions aren't there anymore. And so it's very important for adoption that the operator be kept safe, right? So a no-no, for example, is if the operator has to open the specimen tube in order to access the sample, right? And that's actually what most point of care devices do today. That doesn't drive biosafety. So we're trying to move away from that and ensure that we're working with inactivated sample right from the collection point. We recognize cost is important. Right now the market will bear reasonable costs for products, right? It's not a price sensitive market in most of the world, but over time pricing always becomes relevant. And so again, our goal, as we talked about in the presentation, is to get the formulation of our product into a scalable manufacturer with Cytiva, which dramatically reduces our manufacturing costs and our ability not only to scale, but to deliver something that's affordable. So I think biosafety and cost are something that's very important to keep in the product. And the last thing I mentioned in the presentation, or another thing I mentioned in the presentation, was gene targeting. Right now, from a diagnostic standpoint, it isn't really relevant to know what type of or what strain of virus someone's infected with. It clearly is of interest from an epidemiological and a public health standpoint, but from an actual individual's infection standpoint, it's not very important, right? You don't treat someone differently depending on the variant that they are infected with. So at this stage, from a diagnostic standpoint, detecting variant strain isn't important. What is important is ensuring that your test does detect the various strains that are out there, and that is where we are today. There's five main variants of interest that have been identified. The GENEDRIVE test itself and the formulation of the test itself has been shown not to be affected by those different variants, primarily because we don't target the gene where all that variation or a lot of that variation stems from, right? So I think provided that we can maintain biosafety, we've got a test that works well against variants, we've got a right cost point, and we did mention in the presentation, some of the sort of time to results, which are pretty fast. I think those are all the types of features that will hold our product in good form going forward. Okay. We've got several tests in here, several questions in here about the Public Health England tender and where we stand on that. So for the background, for those that don't know, Public Health England issued a tender a while ago for suppliers to contribute both to COVID and non-COVID related things, over a period of 5 years. Public Health England have in their documentation right from the start been very clear that companies are not allowed to announce any results of those awards, positively or negatively, until they're informed directly by PHE, right? And we have not been as of yet. We did, however, and I can confirm, we did submit all of our current CE marked products. So we submitted our hepatitis C, our high throughput COVID test, and our antibiotic-induced hearing loss test into the tender. We did not submit our point of care product because the tender required products to be CE marked. So that's where we are, but we're not in a position to announce anything. Okay. And then Mark, just looking at the time here, we've got a couple of minutes left. There's a next question is how long can GeneDrive continue selling COVID tests in the United States without an emergency use authorization? Clearly, emergency use authorization is what we are aiming for. The ability to import and sell without an EUA is sort of contained within the same regulations that EUA starts from anyways. So I don't think there's any different timelines associated with selling without one or selling with one. EUA itself, of course, does have by its definition, it's supposed to be temporary, right? It's supposed to be under an emergency. But I'm only aware of a handful of products that actually have formal full FDA review, i.e. they've been through a PMA or a 510K process. 99.9% of products that are being used in the United States are under EUA. So I think it's probably not in the cards that the FDA would withdraw those permissions anytime soon.
David,
okay.
I don't want to cut across you, but I am mindful of time. Obviously, we're coming up to the hour. For every question you answer, there seems to be another two that come in. So I think what would make sense is obviously we give you time to put measured responses where it's appropriate to do so. So all the investors that submitted questions, thank you for doing so. And obviously we will present these to the company for their review. And like I said earlier, we will send you a link notifying you when they're available for your review. David, investor feedback I know is important. What I would propose to do is if I could just ask you for a few closing remarks, and then what I'll do is I'll redirect investors so they can provide you their views and expectations.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Mark. I mean, well, listen, we did try to sum up in the presentation. We do recognize obviously the frustration around the COVID test and commercialization. And what I tried to do in the presentation is to highlight what the roadblocks are. They really are around registrations, which to some extent, are out of our control. And although it might come across as an excuse, that's just the reality, right? That's where we are. I think we are in a position where we are poised in markets with very good distribution partners and a very well performing test, and we just need one of these things to land for us in the near future, right? And then we're off to the races. So again, recognize the frustration, but I would also ask people to look forward at what the opportunity looks like, and we feel confident that we'll get ourselves there.
David, Matthew, thank you once again very much indeed for your time today and for updating investors. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback. If you access this meeting from our website, then the feedback page will appear. But if you access this meeting via the link sent you by email, then you'll simply be asked to log back in to submit your feedback. On behalf of the management team of GeneDrive, we'd like to thank you very much indeed for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session. Good afternoon, or good morning, should I say, to you all.